Managers, what secret tests do you put interviewees through without their knowing? I was a manager for Staples for a little bit and did some hiring of computer techs and computer salesmen or office supply people, copy and print people, as well as general cashiers. There was this one woman with 6 felony convictions that I had to interview for legal purposes. She wore ill-fitting clothes and looked like she'd just come from a war-torn area. Rumpled clothes, dirty face, messed up hair. Her resume was terrible as well. I'd asked her about the felony convictions and she told me that she used to do a lot of substances and got caught, also a few DUIs. She pulled a 1-year Narcotics Anonymous and 6-month Alcoholics Anonymous coins and said she just needed someone to give her a chance. She loves working with people and wanted to get her life back on track. I took her around the store and several people asked me where things were, and I saw her watching me. I'd straighten things on the shelf, smile at people, talk to kids, etc., and she started doing the same things after a few minutes. I needed a cashier soon, so I hired her. The next day she came in to do some computer training and she passed with flying colors. I stuck her on the register with another manager and she did great. After 2 months, I promoted her to my customer service lead and our overall customer satisfaction score rose by over 10 points because of this. Reviews came flying in, saying things like, "The extremely friendly cashier, great cashier, hilarious, love this store, best cashier ever, left my wallet with over $1,000 in it at the store, and a short, butch cashier chased me down to give it to me. Great lady, great store," and many more. You can't judge a book by its cover, or where it's been, I guess. Last I heard, she was in management training. I left the company for greener pastures about 6 to 8 months after that, and now I don't get to hire anyone, except interns or work and study recipients. I spoke to her on Facebook again and she said that she was turned down for more than a dozen jobs before I gave her a chance. Walmart, Warehouse Market, Office Depot, Food Pyramid, and little stores like that turned her down without interviewing her. She called every place and they said that her criminal record made it difficult for them to hire her to work with money. She's about to get her 2-year AA pin next week. That's a great story. I wish every manager out there could read it. My dad once rented a piece of property to a man with a felony conviction. I believe he'd killed someone while drunk driving. My dad said that he'd done his time and everyone deserves a second chance. It turned out that Rusty was the best tenant we'd ever had. He'd regularly do repair and maintenance work on our other properties in exchange for reduced rent. He did a great job, never complained, and when he did owe us rent, it was always on time. If every tenant would have been like Rusty, my dad probably wouldn't have sold everything out of frustration. There you go. Do your due diligence before hiring or allowing people into your lives, of course, but a second chance can be a great gift to give the world. It was a famous urban legend that Henry Ford would try this test on people. Once he decided to hire someone, he'd take them out for a nice dinner. If they put salt on their dinner before tasting it, he wouldn't hire them, or at least he'd think twice about it. My father also had an interesting trick. He worked in purchasing and he'd often meet with multiple vendors to get the best prices or rates or whatever. He'd take a cup and cut the bottom out of it, and then put that cup on top of a fake quote from vendor A, blocking the price. He'd then fill it with BBs and put a lid on it. Then, when vendor B came into his office, he would politely excuse himself and exit the office for one reason or another. If he came back and saw the vendor picking up BBs, he'd ask him to leave immediately. My boss has strange tests. She comes in late for interviews very often, but if she's actually on time and the interviewee is late, they don't get a job. I call this test the Hypocrite. That's a real warning bell. Whenever management doesn't have a schedule that allows them to be on time for an interview, it tends to mean that you should be extremely cautious about taking a job there. Of course, one thing is if you arrive and the interview prior to yours carries on for longer than planned. Another thing is if you're on time and you have one interviewer falling sideways into a chair 10 minutes late and unprepared. Makes me do the desperation algebra to calculate how badly I'd need to take a job at that place. Agreed. I drove to a military site for an interview for a position with a contractor company. Close to an hour later of standing in the security area, not even a lobby, and I called the owner and he said he was on his way. In the background, I heard a baby crying. I ended up taking the job as layoffs were coming at my current job, and it ended up being the most disorganized, dysfunctional, irrational, unprofessional place I've ever worked in. Raise negotiations involved the owner claiming they were a non-profit before caving. Even the amount of vacation time I had would fluctuate 50% based off the owner's memory or BAC. Luckily, they were too lazy to actually track how many days off we took. If they bring a pen or pencil, they're cut above most of my applications. I brought a pen applying for jobs with me. Got a call the next day. Fricking pen thieves. I interviewed with a company recently who told me about their process for interviewing sales engineers. They would go about the normal interview, but that evening they would also go all out for drinks and try to pump the recruits full of alcohol. It was meant to be fun, but also a test of whether the person can know their limits and politely decline or hold their own after a lot of drinks. Apparently, drinking is a big part of sales. Getting the other person drunk while seeming to not try to get the other person drunk while not getting drunk yourself is extremely useful for getting a better price or a larger order or contract. I think at my first job out of school, they might have done something similar. We were out for lunch, presumably as a friendly thing, but also as a way to see how a person handles themselves in a mixed casual professional social situation, common for this job. One of the senior guys starts telling a story about getting way too wasted and acting a fool. I think it was a test to see whether I would respond with my own ridiculous story of debauchery, or try to maintain professionalism. I didn't respond with any stories of my own, despite being a new college grad who only had those kind of stories. I used to do interviewing for a job that was basically hacking the internet. At some point in the interview, I'd ask them increasingly advanced questions until they came to something they didn't know. Then I'd explain it to them. If they thought the new thing was really cool, that was a big plus. It showed they were really interested in the job itself, not just the paycheck. When I was applying to work at a chemical plant, my future supervisor gave me a sheet with several short chemistry problems on it. The first two were normal derivation formulas, the rest were just asking for the names and properties of the compounds listed. I was sweating and getting more and more confused until he took the paper back from me, adding the answers. They were all jokes, things like a ring of 6 iron molecules, Ferris wheel. He just said, "This is a really dumb place to work, so you'll have to have a good sense of humor here." One of my favorite jobs ever. This thread is scaring the crap out of me. I'm desperately unemployed and I had 2 big interviews this week that I thought went well. Did you do the secret handshake? And did you point out the tie with the equation on it and solve it? And did you notice the comics on the fridge? And did you make sure you used the salt at the right time? Less importantly, did you know anything about the subject matter? Seriously, some of these interviewers are making me lose my faith in humanity with how wildly dumb their crap is. So, you want to be a network programmer, huh? Well, grab that cord over there and show me how many sailor's knots you know. I used to think I didn't do very well in interviews. After I saw how interviewing processes usually go, I learned that I'm well above the average candidate. If you think you did well, you probably did do well, and if you don't get the job, they might have found someone who really knows their stuff. Half of these techniques don't prove anything. Most of these people are D-bags who think they're being clever. It does seem that way, doesn't it? Who the frick cares if the applicant with 25 years of work experience and an impeccable track record puts extra salt on his fries? I'd always ask folks to use a particular subject line when sending in their resume for a particular job. Nothing crazy, just please send an email with programming position as the subject. It kind of floors me how few people could actually manage to do this. I noticed when they did. I do the same on Craigslist. I put in a code word at the end of the ad to make sure people actually read the specifications and requirements. Usually, they don't. I'm a supervisor and I've done interviews. I don't ask the typical BS questions. I keep it really relaxed, have a conversation, and just get to know the person while talking about the job. That way, I know what they're really like and not putting on an act for the interview. At the other end of the table, I enjoy these interviews the most. Whether I get the job or not, I at least feel like I put my best foot forward and haven't resorted to cheap cliches. I also feel like the person across from me is more intelligent than the regular trained HR monkeys. Toby isn't a monkey. Engineering manager here. I draw a right triangle, label 2 sides 3 and 4, and then ask them for the remaining side. Many engineers fail this or try to trigonometry it out. I do a lot of interviewing for B2B sales positions. The interview guide I'd been given to use is a couple of timed math questions. At first, I thought it was pretty cruel to put 2 potentially stressful situations together, but it turns out you can learn a lot about someone outside of their skill with numbers. A candidate's response when presented with the math test is a good predictor of how they'd handle the unexpected challenge in front of a client. If a candidate gets a question wrong, I'll ask them what their approach was. Good for determining if they can communicate concepts clearly. And then maybe I'll explain the correct method to see how they'll handle coaching. But I didn't even take Psych 101, so maybe I'm reading way too much into it. Wow, that's horrifying. I can do math just fine, but you put it in the context of a high-pressure situation and my brain just turns off. For example, exams are easy, but standing up in front of a class of people and answering even a basic question and I can't even do 8 times 4. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I work in retail and I'm training to be a hiring manager. I was talking to coworkers about this very question earlier this week, and she told me her old boss's strategy. When a hopeful would show up for an interview, the manager would just do a brief introduction, then feign some distraction, apologize, and tell the interviewee to just walk around the sales floor and familiarize themselves while the manager resolves the issue. While the newbie walks around, the manager would have their sales floor's associates casually approach the interviewee as if they were a customer and have a brief conversation. The idea was just that they would end up shooting the crap about the job and their motives for applying. The person tends to be so wound up in preparing to talk to the boss that they often loosen up when they think they're in the confidence of an equal. Sometimes it's a person who gets along well and would make a really great addition to the team. On the other hand, one guy almost immediately admitted to another worker that he only wanted the job to support his growing substance habit. People lie, especially to the interviewer and especially when they need a job. This strategy allowed the manager to avoid a lot of potential liabilities and a lot of wasted interviewing time. Plus, these people would be working directly with the people doing the informal interview with them, not with the boss. It's important for the new guy to get along with the current crew. I also like that the manager put enough trust in his associates to allow them to be a part of the process. Sometimes a second set of eyes makes a difference. I've typically interviewed people for technical positions, which is a piece of cake. First, ask them technical questions about the job, and then ask them specific details about knowledge they claim to have on their resume. Where I work, padding your resume will get you tossed out rather quickly, but not after being lightly chided for putting stuff on your resume that you don't actually know. People with some work experience tend to pad their resume a bit too much. I remember one guy who listed BGP as one protocol he had experience with. I pressed him to explain it to me, and he caved, then admitted that BGP was used in a project he was involved in, but he had nothing to do with it and didn't understand it. That type of crap does not fly with me. If you put it on your resume, you'd better fricking know it, or I'm going to find out and embarrass you. My dad owns a small IT business. He has a homework sheet of 10 or so basic technical questions he asks potential employees to fill out over email before they meet in person for the interview. The questions cover a variety of programs and problems, and it makes it rather easy for him to sort out those who actually know what they're talking about from those who add a lot of padding to their resume. It saved him a lot of time and has helped him find and build a great team of 3 employees who really know their crap and get the job done right. Out of curiosity, what's to stop me from Googling the answers to the questions? He knows this is something people can do, so he really reads into what they're saying. Is there a common theme of how the person looks at problems? And is there a pattern in their methods? If every question has a dramatically different approach to it, it's quite clear they didn't come up with the answers themselves. Like how teachers look at homework, he isn't looking for the answer, he's looking for their methods. Oh gosh, a company that actually reviews people's technical proficiencies rather than making them go through an arbitrary social test irrelevant to the job. Color me impressed. I used to work in a cafe. The work was simple. I asked the applicants to butter me 2 slices of bread and put a slice of cheese on it to make a sandwich. Those who failed to wash their hands first, failed. What was the pass rate? About 30%. I'm in the middle of interviewing senior software engineers right now. What sucks about TriXX? Where TriXX is the current language they're using. This was generally done in a fairly light-hearted manner after I asked them to briefly describe their background and they mentioned the main technology they're using. It's not a trick or anything, but it's the most important question I ask. What sucks about TriXX? Not enough fisting videos. Am I hired? My dad would have a rubber chicken waiting in the interviewee's chair when they came into the room, and he'd watch them, deadpan, to see what they did with it. My apologies, I didn't realize the last applicant was still here. When I have a big stack of resumes, I randomly split them into 2 piles and just throw one of them in the trash. That way I never work with anyone who's unlucky. On a serious note, bring at least 1, preferably 2 copies of your resume. When I ask you why I should hire you, say something honest and tangible. Everyone is a fast learner. Everyone is also a team player apparently. These are the 2 most worthless comments you can make to me. I'm a retail manager. You could have a great application and resume and 100% on our computer application skills test, but if your email address is anything like love420forever@yahoo.com, your cell phone has a ringatone such as Usher, or you mention boyfriend or girlfriend problems in your interview, I won't be hiring you. At least get a non-substance or party-related resume or application email address. And if you get by and get hired, don't ask for cashier code 420. Seriously. What if my email address is my username and my ringtone is a meowing cat? Username is great. Ringtone, well, you'd probably sound too crafty and overqualified. Why would such a unique person stay in a position at $8.50 an hour and last there? It costs a lot to hire. I'd say the average hourly employee outside of the pharmacy has been there for 5 years and makes around $12.75 an hour. Some make more, been around since 1999, and of course the newer people. Every industry considers those overqualified. It makes sense, sadly. One of the most dangerous kinds of people in an engineering environment is those who won't admit that they don't know how to do something. For this reason, if a candidate couldn't admit at least once during the entire interview that they didn't know an answer, it would raise a huge red flag. With some candidates, I could ask them esoteric question after esoteric question that any reasonable person would see it's okay not to know, and they would hedge and dance around it, or try and guess the answer. My favorite was, what are the first 4 bytes of a file that identifies it as a Java class? There's some funny stuff in this grouping, but a lot of it is just about as useful as checking the potential employee's horoscope. This reminds me of a joke. 3 wannabe MI5 agents are being interviewed, 2 men and a woman. They're given firearms and told to go into a room and shoot whoever's in there. But they're not told that the weapons contain blanks. The first man goes in and sees his girlfriend sitting on a chair in the middle of the room. He immediately breaks down in tears and can't do it. The second man goes in and sees his wife on the chair. After 30 minutes, he pulls the trigger and emerges distraught. He's passed the test, but his wife hates him. The woman goes in and sees her husband on the chair. After 10 minutes, she comes out covered in blood. The interviewer says, "What the frick happened? That weapon was loaded with blanks." "I know," she says angrily. "I had to beat him to death with the chair." I like that the married interviewees are the ones who managed to pass the test. She was told to shoot whoever was in there, not kill him. I'm sure she didn't get the job. Well, she did go above and beyond what was asked, though. She's a go-getter. My boss does the walking test. He does walking interviews and will change his pace to see if people would keep up with him with the change of pace. It's a big thing in hotels. What? Who's going to separate from the person they're interviewing with? Oh crap, I'm suddenly 15 meters in front of the interviewer. I knew I'd screw this up. I'm an editor who sometimes has to hire other editors. The interview is usually just a formality for me. The resume and cover letter tell me almost everything I need to know. Mistakes on the resume? No way you're getting a call. Disorganized or confusing layout? No thanks, I need people whose main goal is to communicate clearly. Applicants move up in the pool if their style choices, such as using the Oxford comma, match my company's, because I figure it will be easier for them to conform to our style guidelines. I'll also look for writing samples on the web. I would assume that for a lot of these personality test type situations, the interviewer is choosing from a pool of people who've already been filtered through their CVs. The interview is a chance to test their critical thinking skills among a few other things. I'm an engineering manager. One of the first things I do for drafting types is have them do a model for something I sketch up. I leave something important off, such as a thread size, part thickness, or maybe hole location, just to see how long it takes them to ask for clarification. People try to be self-reliant to prove themselves, so it makes a lot of people squirm once they figure out they don't have all the information. A good candidate not only finds the missing information quickly, but communicates the issue and seeks out the answer. 4 out of 5 assume an answer, which kills me when I ask the question, "Do you think your print is ready for manufacturing?" Sometimes it really is true that a candidate who has all the answers is someone who never asks the right questions. If you don't push your chair in at Cracker Barrel after the interview, 9 times out of 10 they won't hire you. Manners matter. I ask a question of medium difficulty that any competent person would be sure to get right. I then ask them if they're sure about their answer, implying that it's wrong. Tells you a lot about how they react to feedback and how they communicate with the client or boss when they think they're wrong. IT manager here, I always try to make the person perform a task or write code that will directly relate to the actual job. For example, if you're a front-end HTML jockey, you get a screenshot and an hour to build the page in HTML with Notepad. The special part of the test is that there's no way you can finish it in an hour, so it's as much a question of prioritization as it is technical ability. One guy wasted the whole hour trying to make the rollovers work. No offer. The guys who got offers were the ones who got a basic page running, then went back and went after the frills. My old manager kept a stack of comic books, a lot of old-school superheroes and some of the Star Wars graphic novels, on a mini-fridge behind his desk. He'd always offer the interviewee a bottle of water from the fridge, but in order to get it, he'd have to slightly shift the comic books. If they mentioned the nerdiness or coolness of him having them or asked him about them, then they would be much more likely to get hired. Caleb was a pretty cool guy. So, only people who like comics get hired? I'm pretty much a nerd, but I don't read comics. No, it was more that you had to not be embarrassed by the fact that there was a grown man behind the desk who happened to not like comic books. I don't like them either, but happened to like video games, Lord of the Rings, etc., and could keep up. He just liked people to be able to approach those kinds of awkward conversation topics. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.